There's a very interesting thing that's happening, and we're finding out a lot more now about the shocking news. Dr. Oz has now come out saying that there is not only a nationwide healthcare fraud scheme that is taking place in this country, but the crackdown is about more than recovering stolen taxpayer dollars. It's about preventing tragedies like the death of an 18-year-old college basketball player. He also went on to say they will literally steal your life. I want you to hear more of what he had to say and about these busts from my good friend Kayleigh McEnany talking about this at Fox News Channel.
This is a Fox News alert and a massive bust announced this week. DOJ charging a total of 455 people, including doctors, across 45 states for their alleged role in $6.5 billion worth of fraud schemes. That massive takedown involves a heartbreaking story about an 18-year-old college basketball player who died on his campus. A doctor is now in custody. And the administrator of the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Oz, who I spoke to earlier, says he is not playing games anymore.
This is a war on fraud, the likes of which you have never seen. So that kid was hurt irreparably, passed away because nothing was done about these fraudsters, and they went right after it. Their company billed over $90 million while a child was buried by their family.
We spoke about this case and more, and here is our interview. Dr. Oz, thank you so much for being here. I want to start by asking you about a beautiful young man, 18 years old. We have his picture, Caden Francis. We often think about fraud having financial victims, but this is a human victim. Tell me about Caden.
So I spoke to Caden's mom, Julian, and wonderful kid, A student, was doing just fine. And she got caught up, the mom, in this scam where they were trying to scare parents, and then they would offer these tests to screen the hearts of these kids to make sure that they were healthy. The problem here is apparently the doctor never really looked at the tests. We believe that because the Department of Justice identified that within 11 seconds of getting the test results on this wonderful young man, they said he was fine. Within a month, he was dead. And if you actually look at the autopsy, the mom spoke to me about this. Your heart normally is the size of a fist. His heart was 2.5 times bigger than this, almost the size of a basketball. I mean, big heart. And when you have a heart that large and you push it because you're playing sports, it'll stop sometimes. And that's what happened to this poor young man. Mother lost him. And in her words, she says he was like any street criminal who murdered somebody. That's how clear it was to her that he was a bad person. And she wants that doctor, in her words, to rot in jail so he doesn't hurt more people out on the streets, even though her son will never come back. And you beautifully point out the reality that these folks who are willing to steal from our most vulnerable are more than happy to take your health. They'll steal your life. And that's the pathology we're dealing with. The human cost of the fraud that we have tolerated, and especially since COVID, is massive.
Not only is Dr. Oz saying that this doctor charged in the Justice Department's $6.5 billion fraud was taken, and again, they cleared his heart screening in just 11 seconds, despite an enlarged heart that was, well, then later blamed for his death. Dr. Oz says this is a nationwide crackdown, and it's not just about the money. It's about these types of tragedies. It's about people in our healthcare industry that have realized that they can take advantage of countless Americans. Now, why would they want to take advantage of so many Americans? Because of the money. Follow the money, right? You churn and burn these tests. Like, that's the only way I can know how to put it. You churn and burn these tests. You get paid back. You don't do the actual work. And then people think that they're getting health care when really all they're getting is screwed by a doctor or a group of doctors who is trying to get rich quick. Now, you look at this, and it is shocking. But we know it's been happening now for far too long. We know that it's been happening, and it keeps happening over and over and over and over and over again. We know that it is hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud. But as he described it, it's not just stealing your tax dollars. It is actually stealing people's lives. It is taking away from them with these with basically fake tests. We are seeing this happen where there's actual people that need real health care. and they're not getting the care they actually need or they deserve. And the reason why is pretty simple. They're not getting what they need for one reason, because there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse. And when you have this level of waste, fraud, and abuse, and you have this many people that are backed up trying to get real health care, whether it's fraud in Medicare and Medicaid, and then you're not getting the best care you can get because there's too many people stealing from the system, then it actually puts people's lives at risk. And so what you're hearing here now from Dr. Oz is they're turning over a new leaf. This is about protecting people's lives. It's not just about the money. The stakes right now could not be higher. We finally have a president and an administration fighting hard for America first. But if conservatives lose focus now, the same people who created this mess are ready and waiting to resume their destructive, progressive agendas. And protecting this momentum takes more than just votes. It takes everyday Americans like you staying in the fight for our rights and our freedoms. And that's why more and more people I know are switching to Patriot Mobile, America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Patriot Mobile offers premium priority nationwide service on all three major U.S. networks, unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. And you can switch in minutes while keeping your phone and your number. And I know it because when I made the switch, it literally took me minutes to accomplish that goal. And unlike other carriers, Patriot Mobile puts your money towards causes, defending faith, family, and freedom. That's why I love them. They contribute literally millions each year to organizations on the front lines, fighting for our God-given rights. Patriot Mobile isn't just talking about saving America. They're putting their business behind the fight every single day. So go to patriotmobile.com/verdict and you are going to get a free month of service with a promo code verdict, or you can call them 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-PATRIOT. 972-PATRIOT. Or call them and go online at patriotmobile.com/verdict. Promo code verdict for a free month of service. Make the switch and make a difference every time you pay your bill. I want to get you an update on the war in Iran. We are now being told that the war has paused, diplomacy is returning, and the world, it's holding its breath. What appears to be a, quote, significant diplomatic breakthrough in the Middle East after days of dangerous military escalation that had many fearing a much longer and larger regional war could break out. The United States and Iran have now agreed to temporarily halt military operations and return, quote, to the negotiating table. According to multiple reports, both sides have agreed to stop what officials are calling kinetic activity, meaning active military strikes, and senior negotiators are saying they're now prepared to meet in Doha, Qatar, in an effort to prevent another round of fighting. Now, let's be very clear from the very beginning. This is not a final peace agreement, and this is not a comprehensive settlement either. This is simply a pause. And what does that mean? It means it's an opportunity to see whether diplomacy can yet again have a chance of succeeding, where missiles and drones obviously could not. Now, the agreement reportedly centers on stabilizing one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you've listened to this podcast over the past several months, you know why this matters. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply, as you know, moves through this narrow shipping lane. Any disruption there immediately is impacting the global energy markets. It affects your gasoline prices, inflation as well, and ultimately every American family who's trying to fill up their tanks for summer vacations or travel. Now, one of the biggest goals of these negotiations, they also are being told, is restoring confidence that commercial ships can safely transit the strait without becoming what has been, unfortunately, all too often a target. According to U.S. officials, Iran has agreed to help facilitate safe commercial navigation, while the United States has eased some of the military pressure surrounding Iranians' ports as well as, their oil refineries. as the negotiations will quote-unquote continue. Now, this is an important development because stability in the Strait doesn't just matter to the Middle East. It literally matters to every economy on planet Earth. Now, here's why everyone is also remaining very cautious. The ceasefire has already shown signs of strain. Even after the announcement of the pause, there were fresh reports of military exchanges that threatened to derail the agreement almost immediately. Clearly, hardliners in Iran don't want a deal to be made at all. And that's why officials are describing this as an extremely, quote, fragile moment rather than a lasting peace deal. Now, it also means they're trying to give the talks in Qatar, well, a chance, and they are extremely important. These discussions are also expected to focus on several other unresolved issues. First, freedom of navigation through the Strait, but then second, sanctions and economic issues, which are extremely important to Iran. And then third, the broader regional security concerns. And eventually, the larger nuclear negotiations that have been hanging over the entire conflict since the, first bombing attack by the U.S. Those nuclear discussions had originally been scheduled elsewhere before the recent fighting forced diplomats to completely rethink the agenda altogether. So now, instead of immediately diving into the nuclear file, the first priority is simply making sure the shooting actually stops. Now, there's another problem. You're dealing with terrorists, and you're dealing with hardliners who do not want to actually have real negotiations. That is part of the calculus for why this is, so important. And there's also another wrinkle that demonstrates just how complicated these negotiations are. Iranian state media reported on Sunday that Iranian officials canceled participation in some planned technical talks, arguing that certain conditions they wanted fulfilled, including access to previously unfrozen funds, had not yet been met. In other words, while the broader political agreement to continue talking remains alive, there are massive disagreements that still exist underneath the surface. And that's exactly why, no one is actually thinking this process is going to go quickly or even be easy. What we've seen is this. You have a military incident, one missile launches, one attack on commercial shipping, one misunderstanding, and suddenly diplomacy is replaced by another round of escalation. And that's exactly what the radical terrorists and the terrorist organizations that have been supported by Iran are wanting to happen each and every day. Now, there's the broader regional implications as well. Negotiators are working to establish what has been described as direct communication mechanisms that are intended to prevent accidents from spiraling into another conflict. And then there's Lebanon. And Lebanon remains tied into these negotiations because fighting that is involving the terrorist organization Hezbollah has repeatedly threatened to derail the larger U.S.-Iranian diplomatic process altogether. Now, diplomats are also continuing to try to prevent that from, reigniting while keeping the focus on the broader negotiations between Washington and Tehran. And that's why we need to talk about, why you as an American should actually care. The obvious reason is avoiding another major Middle East war involving U.S. forces. Every American understands the enormous human and financial cost of a prolonged conflict. Certainly the markets understand that as well. Now, a successful diplomatic pause could reduce those risks dramatically. And then you have the energy markets. Every time the tensions are rising, whether it's around the Strait of Hormuz or in Lebanon or with Israel, the markets do what they do. They become nervous. And that is when the oil prices react. That's when shipping insurance increases dramatically, costing you more to get the goods you need. And then the supply chains also tighten. Now, if these negotiations hold, it could provide additional stability for global energy markets and the broader economy as well. That means lower energy volatility. That means it helps you as a family or a small business. It also helps transportation. It helps inflation. And ultimately, it helps American consumers. And then there's the geopolitical picture. So whether you're supportive of the administration's approach or critical of Donald Trump, diplomacy succeeding after military confrontation, would represent a major development and one of the world's most dangerous flash points. This remains, again, an interim pause, and negotiators are still facing enormous disagreements with terrorists. Now, trust between Washington and Tehran, well, it's virtually non-existent. And events on the ground, well, that could change all of this very quickly. So here's what you need to know. In the coming days, it will likely determine whether this temporary halt becomes the foundation for something bigger and larger, or whether the region slides backwards into another cycle of retaliation. Now, for now, the biggest headline is this. The shooting has, quote, largely paused. Diplomats are heading back to the table. The next major test comes down to talks in Doha, and the world will be watching closely because what happens there won't just shape the future of U.S.-Iran relations. It could have major consequences for the global energy markets, regional stability, and then the broader international economy. One thing is for sure, President Trump is holding a hard line, but also trying to make sure diplomacy has a real chance moving forward. Donald Trump going to war with the local radical community in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump saying he will not let communist D.C. mayoral candidate destroy the city. Now, we're witnessing this happen around the country in places like L.A. and New York City with Mondani. And President Donald Trump is now warning that he will not let the Democratic candidate for Washington, D.C. mayor destroy the city with her policies. In a post on Truth Social, Truth shared that George has stated that she wants to empty the prisons, turn the city into a sanctuary city to protect criminal illegal aliens, and defund the police, among other things. Trump pointed out that many people, including him, had worked long and hard to clean up the nation's capital and make sure it is again a safe and prestigious community. He says George, the communist, who is also certainly going to be elected mayor of D.C., has stated that she wants to empty the prisons, make D.C. a sanctuary city, oppose ICE, welcome criminal illegal aliens back into our beloved capital, and resist the anti-crime crackdown, as well as defund the police. He went on to say she also wants to expand cashless bail and so many other capital destroying things. Now, Trump continued to share what he would meet with George, and he said he called a communist, adding that he was warning that Washington, D.C. is a safe place and a prestigious community, saying many people, including myself, have worked long and hard to get it there, and we will not let it be destroyed by a communist adherent to who has no intention to make America or make Washington great again. Now, in response to Trump's post, George issued a statement that she would, quote, stand up to anyone who puts our city and its residents in harm's way. Yeah, so apparently the president, she's saying, is putting Americans into harm's way. While most of these claims are incorrect, the fact is that the mayor of our nation's capital and the administration are going to be meeting with each other, is what George said. I'm willing to work with anyone, including the administration, to improve the lives of D.C. residents. And I will stand up to anyone who puts our city or its residents in trouble. Now, again, Trump's post comes after he earned praise from even Democrats regarding construction and landscaping projects throughout the city. Among the projects include the administration's restoration of monuments and the fountains, such as the Meridian Hill Park and the fountain at Columbus Circle outside of D.C.'s Union Station. Thank goodness they're actually working again, something that has not happened in, well, years and years and years. The Columbus Circle in their historic front door to Washington, D.C., well, it's now working again and beautiful. This is all a part of what the President of the United States of America has been wanting to do. Now, if you go back to August of 2025, there was a video that showed the city clearing a homeless encampment located near the Kennedy Center. That came after Trump vowed to crack down on crime in the city. That move came days after President Trump said, we're not doing this anymore. And then the city, he officially invoked Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, placing the D.C. Metro Police Department under the direct federal control. And then he activated the National Guard, which of course meant that liberals would lose their minds because he was actually trying to have a safer city. While George has said she will, quote, work with anyone, including the president, she has also said there are limits to that, quote, cooperation, saying, we are not going to be able to stand up for our autonomy and fight for D.C.'s statehood ultimately by just complying in advance. I have also been very clear that I will work with anyone, including the president, for the best interest of the residents. So the question is obviously, well, this. How can you be working for the interests of the citizens of D.C. if you're advocating for illegal immigrants? How can you say you're working for the citizens of Washington, D.C. if you're wanting to let everyone out of jail? Again, those are her words. How are you going to work for the citizens? Again, a simple question of Washington, D.C. if you're advocating for illegal immigrants to show up, putting them ahead of American citizens. And then she said she's also got to advocate for, as she describes it, statehood. Another simple question. How are you going to advocate for statehood if you're going against the President of the United States of America and really just pushing for your radical communist agenda? You look at the facts of what she's in favor of. It's really no different than Mamdani. It's no different than Gavin Newsom. It's no different than so many of these radicals that we see day in and day out. And what they're running on now and what they're hoping is they can outlast the President of the United States of America. You can also look at the Soros stooges. George Soros and his son Alex have funneled a staggering $103 million into the midterms so far, and they're on track to shatter spending records. They're helping people like Representative Ilhan Omar and the Maine Senate nominee Graham Plattner, the mogul, again spending more than $103 million already in the midterm elections, sending money to Senator Raphael Warnock and other radicals like Jayapal. This is their entire guide. This is how they want to destroy this country, and they're using massive amounts of cash to actually do it. Now, the billionaire Democratic kingmaker Soros putting in $102.8 million in the midterm elections again so far. And with the November election still more than 4 months away, Soros is probably going to shatter his own record of $128 million set during the last midterms 4 years ago. He's hoping that Americans will be disengaged, and, well, money talks, and Soros's money says the most. It's all about him trying to destroy the United States of America. Soros has been described as a wannabe Bond villain responsible for the radical takeover of the Democratic Party. And by the way, it's working. Only a fraction of this cycle's contributions, 793,000, were made in the 95-year-old mega donor's actual name. Almost all the money, $102 million, was funneled through the Democratic Political Action Committee, the super PAC that Soros launched in 2020, which acts as the family's main political arm. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Again, Democrats say they hate rich people until they're begging them for more than $100 million. Now, of all the money he's given for the midterms, over half, $52 million, actually came from George Soros through the private corporation under his name, and the other $50 million from Fund for Policy Reform. That's a nonprofit, is what they call it. Yeah, a nonprofit to just, get involved in politics. And clearly, that's also working. Now, this is without counting the family's main organization, known as Open Society Foundation, which funds efforts to decriminalize drugs, open the border, and abolish the police, and its lobbying wing, the Open Society Action Fund, which is even more obscure as it doesn't have to disclose their political spending because it's registered as a nonprofit, claiming to do merely advocacy work. Now, in previous election cycles, the Open Society Action Fund's cash flow went to the most extreme. The lefty stars they created, the Squad, the AOCs, Ilhan Omar, and all of this is again showing that George Soros and his son, they're doing everything they can to find the most radical candidates, like the D.C. mayor candidate, and destroy our country literally from within. So pay attention, because this is what the midterm elections are actually all about. Thanks as always for joining us on the show. Don't forget, you can grab the Ben Ferguson podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll see you back here on this radio station next week and on the podcast all week long.